Hello, welcome back to yet another video from Classic Music and Arts Institute. My name is Ernesto Raimat, and I am a percussion teacher at Classic Music and Arts Institute. I hope you're all doing okay and you're trying to stay safe at home. Last week, we started this series of videos which Classic Music wanted to do in order to get our community a little bit more excited or curious about music learning. Now, as a percussion teacher, of course, I've been focusing these videos in drum techniques and different ideas and cool things that we can do from home while we are passing these horrible times. So last week video, I recommend you watch it. We talked a little bit about some simple exercises that you can start practicing at home even if you don't have a full drum kit. So it's a very interesting video to watch, so I recommend you check that one out after we finish with this one. I would like to tell you that if you have any questions throughout this presentation today, you can ask them on the comments here, and I will be glad to answer any of your questions. Today's video, it's a little bit inspired by my students. Once they come to my classroom for the first time, and I always will have to ask them the simple question like, why do they want to learn drums? Or what do they see themselves doing once they learn a little bit about playing the drums? And quite often I get a similar answer. They will always tell me that I want to learn the drums so I'm able to play over some music without having to like learn a specific song. Or my friend has a guitar and he comes to my house and I would just like to learn how to just jam with him or with that guitar or any sorts of things. It's just like I want to learn how to play the drums so I can enjoy and feel a little bit more free when I'm playing. And that will be today's topic. So the whole point of today is for me to give you like an insight on a very simple concepts of drumming that will help you, luckily will help you to get you into playing those favorite tracks that you want without any stress and knowing exactly what you're doing. So let's move into today's presentation. Great, and I'll have another camera, so I'll have to talk over here. So jamming to any song. Here, we're going to be talking about jamming and the concept of what jamming is. So jamming is basically an improvised moment that you will have with your instrument. So there's nothing pre-planned. There's no notes that you will need to learn for that specific moment. So just sitting on your drum and playing over a rhythm that you like or just a song that you like, that's what we consider jamming. Now, of course, you might also have heard about a jam session. That's a very popular concept too. And that's basically just more than one musician just having a gathering and performing over loops or melodies that have been created on that moment. So with today's video, I hope you get an idea on how to get into that jamming mood. So the next time you have the opportunity to play with any of your friends, you don't feel shy and you feel a little bit more comfortable with whatever you can do on a drum. So in order to do that, we will have to learn how to create a groove. Okay? By groove I mean a rhythm. That's a rhythm that we're going to be playing for a certain amount of time. That's a loop, a repetition of something that we will be doing. That's what we drummers will call a groove. So let's go into the basics here, and I'm going to show you the same way that I use when I'm in my class with younger students or any beginner that has no idea how to learn or how to read musical notes, musical notation. So here we have a very simple table. I hope it's simple for you, but don't worry, I'm going to go and explain it through. So we have a very simple table with some numbers at the top. Those numbers are going to represent beats that we're going to be counting. And the only thing that we need right now to create these grooves are going to be what I like to call the power trio of a drum set, which are going to be 3 instruments here that are going to be at the root of any rhythm that you play. So we have a hi-hat, we have a snare, and we will have a bass drum. Okay, so you have the picture there as a reference. Now, let's go into that. I'm not going to be playing today on a real drum kit, as I don't have one right here in my house, but I'm using a Yamaha DTX Multi-12, which is just a drum pad, which allows me to have exactly the same sounds as I will have on a real drum. So I get my hi-hat, I get my bass drum, or my snare. Okay, in order to do that, I will have in between exercises and samples, I will have to mute a couple of microphones, so bear with me. Now, let's move into creating your own groove. Let's start on the basics here. We have a hi-hat, which it's indicated here to be played with the right hand, and we have 4 beats to play over that. So let's mute that microphone so we can hear better. So we have our hi-hat, and that hi-hat is just going to go through a series of beats that are going to sound as even as possible. So we're going to start counting 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to add the hi-hat to that count. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, like layers, I'm going to start adding the rest of the instruments, like the snare or the bass. So whenever I get to beat number 3, I'm going to play that snare. Whenever I get to beat number 1, I'll play that one with the bass drum. So I'll start from the top. So we have the hi-hat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, snare, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now bass drum. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. Okay, so now we've got one of the most popular rhythms there is on a drum set. This is what I like to call a rock beat. It's based on those 4 beats, and there's nothing else to that. So that's it. Now the next step we need to get, it's learn how to play that groove a little bit faster, so gain a little bit of speed on that exercise. So by the end of your practice, your rock beat should sound like this. Okay, sounds pretty cool. Now, I said that we didn't need to know how to read music notes for this type of exercises. So that's why I created this next slide here. So you see as a reference how these boxes are going to represent each one of the notes that we will be reading later on the other exercises here. So it's very simple to get, as we have on the hi-hat with the right hand. That will be obviously be all the X's we get at the top. The same way we're going to have our lowest note, that's going to be the bass drum, as a reference to how low the bass drum sounds. And right in the middle, on beat number 3, we're going to have the snare. Okay, so it's pretty easy to understand once you get that table first. Okay, let's move to the next thing here. Now as I mentioned before, we're going to start creating our own groove. So I'm going to give you some tips on how you can do that by making variations over the same pattern as you were counting it. Now I changed a little bit the counting on the top of these exercises, and you see that I added an extra beat in between my numbers, the numbers that I'm counting. And this is due to the time signature that I'm using for these exercises, something that we're going to go a little bit deeper later here. But the only thing that we need to worry right now is that our hi-hat is just going to play twice faster than the beats that we're doing on bass drum and snare. So basically I keep my stronger beats, my number beats on bass drum and snare, and the rest I'm just going to fill the in-between beats with the hi-hat. So the count for this exercise will go as follows: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that and is going to represent that middle hi-hat there. So I'll play the exercise number 1 again, counting out loud, so you get an idea of what am I doing here. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So we got that first exercise there, and now we're already reading music, musical notes. Now, for exercise number 2, what I did was just to create a variation to that first exercise. When we have I just added a second bass drum into that extra beat that I had on the hi-hat on the first beat. Now that's going to create a variation over this groove. I see that Johan, one of my students, is online. So hello, Johan. How are you? I hope you're doing okay. Great. So now let's move into that beat number 2. Beat number 2 is going to have 2 bass drums before the first snare. It goes like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so we got that. Now you get the concept. We're just moving around that bass drum, that extra bass drum that we just added. We're going to be moving it around so we can create 2 more patterns like this. So I'll play now pattern number 3, which is going to be another very popular beat that you might have heard in lots of Michael Jackson songs. So this is a pretty cool one to play right now. So as I said, now I have my bass drum in all my strong beats, and I'm just going to add the snare on 2 and 4. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, now let's move into the fourth one. The fourth one is just another variation of the same pattern. If you notice, I haven't changed anything on my hi-hat or my snare beats. Great. So let's start with the bass drum on 1, and now I'm going to add that bass drum on the second half of that second beat. Same thing on the second half of my exercise. So beat number 4 will follow, will go like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, so now we got 4 different variations over a very similar rock beat. Now that's going to bring a lot of color to whatever music you're playing with. Now that doesn't mean that we're going to just be playing each one of these exercises throughout the whole song. That's the whole point of jamming. Jamming is improvising, so we'll be creating music as we go. Now with all these ideas, I like to think of these as a library of information that we can store somewhere in our brain. Now that we know all these beats, I can take from each part, my favorite part of each one of these beats, and mix them into a bigger groove or something a little bit more interesting sound-wise. So let's move to the next slide so you understand what I'm talking about here. Now, we're seeing a combination of some of the previous beats into one single count of 4 beats. Now, this is where it starts getting a little bit interesting. Now here the combinations are infinite. We can do so many things with this. You'll see by doing exercise 1, now you're going to see a combination of the first beat that we did, the first groove, and the second groove on the same count of 4. We'll go as follows. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, we got another interesting combination here. Exercise number 2. Now I'm going to use what I did on the previous exercise number 4 and exercise number 1 combined on the same pattern. So let's see how it goes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, so we got that one. Now on the third one, I'm just trying here to get you a little bit more experimental with whatever you're doing on your drumming. Once you've learned all these basic techniques, why not you can start getting outside of those boundaries that we're talking about here and creating new beats over these simple counts. Now on the exercise number 3, I just added a third bass drum to my second pattern, which is going to bring me a different idea right now to what it could be a very similar groove to number 2. By adding that second bass drum, it brings more color to the music. Let's try that one. Number 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1. Of course, now all these exercises, I'm playing them quite slow so you can follow along with me with the music sheet. But now once we start playing these exercises a little bit faster, we're going to start getting way more interesting musical ideas. Let's play for a second number 2, and I'm just going to speed up that exercise. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and great. So now, depending on the sound that you're doing, you're going to start choosing from each one of these exercises here. Again, there are way too many combinations to be doing right now, so I'm just keeping it into the basics so you start exploring a little bit more on your own. Now, once we have these patterns created, let's talk about musical phrases. Now, these musical phrases are going to work the same way as we build sentences when we speak. So we're going to present an idea and we're going to give it a conclusion, right? So music, in a way, will work in a similar way. Now I'm just talking about here counts of 4, and this is going to limit a little bit the how complicated these phrases can be. But now, depending on the music that you're playing, your phrases may change. Now with the count of 4, which is a very popular thing to have on all Western music or rock music, pop music, reggae, some styles of jazz music will also use this count of 4. So that means that my phrases are going to start building from the repetition, some sort of repetition of those 4 counts or those 4 beats. Now a full count of 4 beats is what we call a music 1 bar of music if we were playing in 4/4. So to create one full musical phrase with these counts of 4, I'll have them to repeat that beat that I played counting 4 times, and that will give me a full idea. Yeah? So it will work like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, so by counting 4 times, it gives that sensation that after that 4th time, we should do something else to change or just to go back to the beginning. That's why you see a lot of drummers, they will add a crash cymbal to that first beat after that repetition. And that's a very cool thing to do. It emphasizes that moment that you finish your phrase. Now, talking about phrases, there are so many ways to start or finish a musical phrase. And drums, we call these endings for these phrases, we call them fills. And fills is basically a very interesting thing that we can do on the drums when we take our hands out of the main rhythm that we were doing, yeah, that sense of comfort that we had on that beat that was repeating for so long, and now just at the end of my phrase, before I change or I repeat my phrase, I'm going to create some tension by removing all the patterns, all the rhythms I had on my groove, and moving around the rest of the drums and cymbals that I have on my drum kit. Now to that's what we call a fill. Now I have a couple of ideas here on how you can start building your own fills without stressing too much on a lot of coordination and a lot of like new patterns or rhythms or styles. These fills that I'm going to show you today, they work in all sorts of musical styles, and it's just a way for you to use it as a practice. Now let's move to the next one here. This is one full phrase of 4 bars of music, and then at the end I just removed the full rhythm that I was doing, and I just mark the 4 beats inside that bar with the word fill. So that indicates that I'm going to be doing a fill at the end of this phrase using those 4 beats that I had left. Also below that, I have kind of like a drawing of like the positioning of the main drums or the standard drums that you're going to have on your drum kit. So you have the snare, you have a high tom-tom, a middle tom-tom, and a floor tom-tom. Now, a way that I find very interesting and very easy to start getting into creating your own fills, it's by matching each one of these drums to a specific beat of those that we're counting on the last bar of my phrase. So let's say that beat number 1, I'm going to play whatever pattern I will do there, I'll do it on the snare. Beat number 2, I'm going to play it on the high tom-tom. Beat number 3, I'll play it on the middle tom-tom. And beat number 4, I'll play it on the floor tom-tom. Okay? So now, to give you an idea of how that's going to sound, I'm just going to keep those counts with only one note. So I'll play one note on each one of the drums at the end of my phrase. You're going to see the change from the rock beat that I was doing, and now how I can connect my next idea with this breaking of the musical rhythm that I had before. Let's do that full example there by playing one beat on each drum. We'll go like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 2 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 3 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2, 3 and 4 and 3, 2 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so you get the idea. Now we start creating our own fills, and by creating I mean we're going to generate a different pattern for each one of these beats. Okay, so now that we assign each one of these drums to a specific beat, I'll say that I want to play, instead of just one note, I can play 2 notes on each one of those drums. I'm going to make my fill a little bit more dynamic. That will sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 2, 2 and 3 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. Okay, same way that I did 1, now I did 2 notes on each one of those beats. I can start fitting there any sorts of notes that I want. So let's say I want to add 3 notes to my main beat, so to each one of those beats. So let's play one more time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 2, 2, 3 and 4, 3, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2. Very good. Okay, so we got that. Now from 1 for 2 beats, 3 beats, 4 beats on each drum, we could keep that going as long as we want. Same way that we could change that hi-hat pattern, and then after a couple of phrases played, I could change that hi-hat pattern and move it to a different cymbal. Say the right cymbal. That's going to be useful when the music that you're playing with changes mood. It goes from the verse of the song to the chorus of the song, or you want to change from the intro of the song to a solo for the guitar. All those sorts of changes that we know happen inside a song. A drummer can also support that without having to change too much of the main groove, and just changing a little bit of the sound of the instruments that is using. So let's do a couple of rounds of this one, creating different fills each time, and changing after each fill the sound of my right hand, from the hi-hat to the right cymbal. Let's see how that sounds. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3 and 4 and 3, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, So we get the idea. Now I've been always played from the snare to the high tom, middle tom, and floor tom. So let's talk about how we can make variations not only to the patterns that I'm playing, but to the order of the drums that I'm going to use. This is what we call in drumming orchestration. Now with orchestration, I'm going to use the melodic part, the different tuning of these drums to create certain melodies, to emphasize certain moments of the song. So this is when you start getting way more creative by changing your patterns, the way you do the fills, the sound of the instruments, like changing from a hi-hat to a right cymbal, and at the same time we're moving that melody, that perceived melody that we had from snare, high, middle, low tom-toms. And that will look something like this. So I created, this will be like the beats assigned to each one of the drums. So in the example number 8, we have our snare to be beat number 1, then high tom, middle, beat number 2, number 3 on the middle, and number 4 on the floor tom. Now exercise the sample number 2, B, it's going to have the same order, but right now it's inverted. So I start from the floor tom, middle tom, high tom, and then the snare. That's going to give a completely different feel to whatever I'm doing. Here is an example of that. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 2, 2, and 3, and 4, and 3, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 2, 2, 3, and 4, and 3, 2, 3, and 4, and... Okay, so we have different melodies created from these tom-toms or the rest of the drums. Same way that we just inverted the path, now I can start crossing drums and creating all sorts of interesting ideas. Now, if you notice, I'm only staying to the same pattern repeated over and over again over the old drums. Now what I can do is to, let's say on beat number 1, I want to play just one beat. On beat number 2, whatever drum I'm using for that one, I'm going to play 2 beats. Beat number 3, I'll play 3. Beat number 4, I'll play 4 beats. And now we have a different path to take here. When we start matching not only the combination of the order of the drums that I'm doing, but the patterns that I'm going to be playing on each one of these beats. So now, I think that you're good to start playing and creating your own patterns, your own fills, to do the accompaniment for any song. Now, if your friend goes to your house with a guitar, now you can sit more comfortable on a drum kit and perform some of these fills. Now, to show a little bit of that, so to show you how easy it is to just start jamming to any songs, I had downloaded a track, and I'm going to let you know later where you can get all these tracks so you can start practicing at home. And I purposely didn't listen to this track before this video, so I could get also into the getting to listen to the music while I'm playing, which is an important part when we're jamming, is paying attention to whatever is happening. Okay, so we can quickly adapt our playing and serve a little bit better to whatever music we're playing with. And the other thing is that I'm going to try to keep with the same samples that I talked before. I'm going to try to play as simple as possible, so you get the idea that even on this simple way you can create lots of cool patterns to do your accompaniments. So let's move over here and let's just jam a little bit over this track. This one will be a funk track, so first time for me to hear it, so I'll let it go for a couple of bars so I understand how fast the beat is going to go, and then I'm going to start introducing some beats and fills, keeping that count of 1, 2, 3, 4 bars, and then my last bar will always be a fill. Let's see how it goes, so wish me luck. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is try to find the pulse for that song, right? So I think I got it on this one. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. So that's going to be my main count, my main pattern here. Excellent. Now, what I can do, I'll go right from the beginning of this one, and I'll start playing variations of those rock beats that I had before, that you will see they are going to perfectly match the mood of this song. Let's get into that. Okay, so I hope this sort of demo slash class help you to get a little bit more confident about just jamming to any songs. If we follow these concepts, and of course, we'll always have to practice. None of these will come by just sitting on a drum and just playing two songs. We always need to create a certain practice routine when we can add a lot of the exercises that we talked last week and some of the exercises that we talk here So the more confident, the more familiar you are with all these patterns, the more confident you're going to get then to start creating new things over all of these. Now, as I promised, I was going to talk a little bit about where I got those tracks that you heard me play right at the beginning and now at the end. And these are materials that you can find on YouTube. There are tons of channels with a lot of drumless tracks that you can play to. And these tracks are going to be in all sorts of beats, styles of music, different rhythms. So here we have, it's called Drumless Backing Tracks. That's the site where I got these two tracks here. There are tons of those, so by just typing drumless tracks or drumless songs, you're going to get a ton of information there. So, as the purpose of this video is to get you a little bit excited or a little bit more curious about learning music, I'm sure that you're also going to get interested on getting an instrument at home. And we have that opportunity by visiting this website here in Oman. So www.tunesomanonline.com. That's our online shop, and you can get there from instruments to accessories to books, so you can start your path on your music learning. I think that I'll leave it here today. Next week, we're going to go back, same thing, Thursday at 4 p.m. So we're going to keep this series of videos. So next week, if you're interested in learning like basic styles that you can start adding to these concepts of jamming, so you just don't want to jam on a rock style or a funk style, and you want to change that a little bit. So please stay tuned with us, and I hope to see you then next week. Hope you enjoyed this talk today. Goodbye.